Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we should get started. We've still got some more people rolling in, but we are going to be recording this so that we will have it for anyone that's late to attend. So I would like to welcome you to our next session of our Lunch and Learn series. Today we are going to be discussing data views and critical numbers. My name is Heather George, so welcome. Today our presenters are going to be Amira Mohammed and Tim McManus. And just before we get started, I'd like to move on to some housekeeping items. We do have all the lines muted, so please use the Q&A if you have any questions. And we will be recording this session and making it available in our Learning Center after the presentation. The link to the website is right there on the screen, and you can find it under our About tab on the website. And then one more quick item to go through is our future webinars that we will be having. Our next one is set for December 15th, where we will be going over Excel add-in reporting. We welcome any feedback that anyone has for these. It would be great to hear if there's anyone out there that has a topic that they would just love for us to go into further detail on or share with people. And if you send an email to info@aitbusiness.com, that comes to myself directly, and I will personally make sure that it gets to the right people and we get it on the list. And with that, I would like to open it up and welcome Amira to begin the presentation. Amira?
Thank you, Heather, and thank you all for making the time to learn with us today. So again, my name is Amira, and I am joined today by Tim. And for the next hour or so, we're going to be talking about a couple of cool SyteLine tools that are all about optimizing not only how to extract information from your ERP system, but also how to present it in a way that's actually useful for your business. So one of these tools is called a data view, and the other one is what's known as a critical number. Now, you may have heard of them before, and maybe you're here to learn more, or maybe you've never heard of them before, but you found your curiosity piqued by the Lunch and Learn invite. Whatever angle it is that you're approaching from, what you should know is this. At their core, data views and critical numbers are used to basically get a better handle on ERP data. So whether you're looking for a less time-consuming data extraction process, if you're looking for less errors in that process, if you're looking for a little more consistency in performance grading, you want some quicker reporting, whatever the specifics are, ultimately your goal is to arrive at some kind of solid, trustable metrics and KPIs that you can use to drive actionable business decisions. So that's the ultimate goal of these two tools. And that is what data views and critical numbers can help you accomplish in really powerful ways, and what we're going to explore today. So our agenda is pretty high level. Obviously, we're going to be talking about what these tools are and what types of situations are best suited to each tool. So in other words, the what and the why. We're going to be talking about some of the ingredients that are used to make up a data view or a critical number. So those components that make them tick, basically. We're also going to be talking about the common elements between them, what makes them similar, and the differences between them, why each one is best for a different type of situation. And then finally, we're going to look at what options exist as far as the final output of each tool. And it's all going to culminate into these basic hands-on examples, which we're going to see at a couple of points throughout this presentation. Now, as far as technical level is concerned, full disclaimer, data views and critical numbers can get a little bit complex. There is a learning curve to building them, and an element of complexity based on what kind of data you're pulling in, or how much data you're pulling in, or how specific that data has to be, or how much transforming you want to do with it, etc. Which, by the way, is not a bad thing at all. Data views and critical numbers are great from the standpoint of being highly, highly customizable, which makes them quite powerful tools for doing exactly what it is that your business needs them to do. But today we're not going to get quite into that level. We're going to keep it really, really 101 intro level. All of our examples today have been pre-built for the most part, and we're going to be focusing a lot more on concepts than building technical skills, which would be more in a training type situation. So as you can see, this is us today. We're on our AIT helicopter tour. We are peering down at the weeds, and we are not actually having to wade through them. We're just keeping it very high level. So let's start off with the what and the basic definitions of what is a data view and what is a critical number. Starting out with the data views, Infor calls them advanced data grids that you can create to query a custom set of data. But what exactly does that mean just in plain English? So a query is just a really technical way to say that I send a computer program to go grab me some information, and that program then comes back with my results that meet whatever search criteria I've sent it out with. Data views are, again, highly customizable, meaning that I don't have to send my program out to grab every single field out there. I can actually cherry pick which screens and which fields are important to me and important to the task at hand that I care about seeing at the moment. So let's say, just as a really simple example, I'm putting together some kind of customer satisfaction metrics. And the only thing I really care about is customer order shipped late versus on time metrics. I don't have to sit there and slog through the ship via and the ship to and the freight cost and all that other stuff that normally comes bundled with all the customer order data. I can specifically hone in on the data types that are relevant to my task at hand and ignore the background noise that would distract me. Another perhaps relevant data to our day and age, let's say I'm trying to deal with some COVID supply chain issues, and I want to take a closer look at how our inventory is doing, but very specifically, I want to look at the records related to our PPE inventory. So rather than looking through every single record out there and having to go through a bunch of filters to figure out how I'm going to hone in on those in particular, I can go straight to what it is that I care about, and again, just reducing that background noise. Not only that, but my results are automatically going to be presented to me in this filterable, sortable, rows and columns sort of way, just like Microsoft Excel. So if I'm just the average computer user, that's great because it's going to be presented to me in a format that is familiar and that I'm already probably pretty used to, and a little bit easier for me to digest than perhaps a more technical looking format. By contrast, critical numbers are a much higher level kind of metric. So a data view is going to go out and fetch you all of the records that you need that meet your search criteria, and it's going to present it to you again just as this data table, the rows and columns very similar to Excel. So the image on the left is what a typical data view might look like. And a critical number is going to do all of that. It's going to fetch all of that data, and it's going to, find what you need based on your filters, but it's going to take it one step further, and it's going to consolidate all of that into a single KPI number. So think of it almost like the speedometer on a car. At any given time while you're driving, a lot of stuff's going on in the background, and there's sensors and there's mechanics and all that. But when you're passing through a speed trap, that one number you care about is what's on the speedometer, your miles per hour. Your critical number is that one critical number in the moment. The image on the right is a perfect example of what would otherwise be a bunch of technical numbers heavy data being summarized and pulled together into some kind of single sum or average or what have you. And then because it is expressed as a single number, you now can very easily present it in this very visual way. Critical numbers are also handy in that they let you add consistent definition to your results to classify them as good or bad or okay. So let's say one of your critical numbers is your value of total inventory. And let's say that value is $2.5 million. So without any context of what you're actually targeting, $2.5 million is just a number. It doesn't mean anything. It is meaningless. Critical numbers let you actually set goals and alerts that you can use to instantly tell how the news of a certain number should be taken. So they drive business decisions by telling us whether we should be looking at $2.5 million in inventory and saying, oh, hey, we're doing great. That's our goal. That's what we're targeting. Or, wow, we need to do something about that because that's falling in the red for us. So critical numbers will actually lend some context and some definition to your data. And by the way, critical numbers do still, despite that very visual, simple format, they do give you the ability to drill down into some more detailed information and still look at it as a grid. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. For now, though, I want to get into this next part. We have a really general sense at this point of what these two tools are. And we know how they're similar and we know how they're different. So they've got some cool features, and the real question is, okay, why would we bother with them? After all, the output resembles something that Excel could produce. It's something that we can already get using our current methods. Why would we go through the trouble of clearing that learning curve and incorporating this into our day-to-day process when we can just kind of keep doing what we're doing and keep getting what we're getting? So what I have on my screen is just a very high-level basic summary of what your extraction and reporting process might look like today. So you've got your data originates from SyteLine. It gets copied out or exported to Excel. Sometimes you have to do that more than one time if the data that you're looking for comes from a bunch of different forms. And once it's all in Excel, someone needs to get to work actually turning it into a usable format. So they need to scrub and transform that data and output it into whatever its final intended form is. So whether that's a report or a graph or what have you. And they may have to do a couple of different steps to accomplish this. They might have to take the data that's in there and trim it down to only show what's important. They may have to relabel the data in there. They may have to run pivot tables to summarize stuff. They may need to marry together the data from one source to the data of another source via VLOOKUPs or reference index matches and stuff like that. They need to be perhaps converted into some kind of consolidated KPI number. You may need to derive new information from it. You may need to, again, just turn it into a visual graph. Whatever the specifics are, the idea is work needs to be done to get it into its final intended state. And this might be working out for your business so far, but as your reliance on ERP information in general grows, and in fact, the size of your databases themselves grow, it can end up taking a lot of manual work. This can be work that is quite time-consuming. It can be work that is prone to human error or people forgetting steps along the way. The whole process of exporting and scrubbing that data can become a very uncontrolled and inconsistent process. It can rely very heavily on people's tribal knowledge rather than being more consistent. And it's work that gets you to where you need to be, but it's at the cost of your resources, time, and effort. The main problem that Dataviews and critical numbers are working to eliminate is to basically minimize or eliminate all of those manual steps, or at least as many of them as possible, so your resources can spend less time crunching the data and spend more time on analysis and decision making. So the things that you hired these skilled workers to do. And that is really where their main value comes from. So now that we've gotten a little bit down about the what and the why, I want to talk about some of the components, some of the inner parts of what makes a data view tick, the mechanics. We're going to start with the data views. The main building blocks of a data view are what's known as IDO collections and properties. So in layman's terms, an IDO collection is a set of related data, and it's all joined together, often in a single form. And a property is a specific field or piece of information within that collection. So the best way to think of it, a bunch of properties will come together to form one IDO collection. If you look to the right there, just a very, very simple example of that type of relationship. In this case, the property is what's known as the COI item. So that's sort of that background technical term for that field there called item. And it is a property within an IDO collection known as SLCO ships, or as it's more commonly known, the order shipment screen. I know that these names for collections and properties seem a little techy and a little programmy almost, but this information is pretty easy to figure out for anybody on your ERP application that has access to design mode. So it's really not that difficult at all. Now, beyond the collections and the properties, you also have control over how much information a data view is showing you through filtering. So filters can be applied at different points in the process. You can either preset your filters during setup, and by that I mean you can decide ahead of time, you know what, the purpose of this data view is to get this information and no other types of information. I want to eliminate that irrelevant information from the get-go. I don't want the users to even have to deal with it. Or you can save filtering to the end. You can allow the data view to pull in a wider amount of information and let the users themselves go in and narrow it down based on filter results that are kind of similar to how Excel uses them. And that's helpful from the standpoint of you can have users of different functional areas or users trying to accomplish different tasks, hone in on exactly what they want using the same data view instead of having to build a specific one for each individual subtask. There is one other type of filter called input parameters. They're sort of a hybrid between the two that we just mentioned, and we'll see that in a little bit more detail later on. The other thing you can do with data views is control who has access to them. So you can control this either by individual user, or you can set it to be accessible to an entire user group. And this is really useful from the standpoint of limiting who can see sensitive or confidential information. So just like you do with your SyteLine forms, you don't necessarily give everybody access to see everything. There's certain sensitive information like, say, your price lists or your sales contact names or your payroll information that only needs to be seen by certain people. You can do the exact same thing with a data view and just make sure that not everybody in your organization has access to it. So I want to take a couple of steps back, though, to the properties to just illustrate a really key point in understanding how exactly a data view is organized. And that is the difference between what's just considered regular old data that you want to show up on your data view, so just a property, versus a special kind of data called linking data. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I want to reiterate this point. Any two screens can be married together on a data view as long as you have some kind of common information between them to link it. So going off of the example of the last slide, we were looking at the order shipment screen and we are looking at that items field in particular. Let's say that we want to create a data view and we want to pull some select information from the order shipment screen that's important to us. But let's say we would also like to take it a step further and see the product codes on each customer order line and be able to sort and filter and summarize based on those product codes. So if you are at all familiar with the order shipment screen, you know that the product code is not a field that appears on there. It actually appears only on the items master. And so those are two different screens where you need data to come together to form one record. So everything that's highlighted yellow just then, these are the properties that we want to show up on our data view. This is what's just known as the regular data or the properties or what have you. And everything that you see there that is highlighted or that is circled in red is what's known as the linking data. This is the way that we tie these two screens together. And as you can imagine, it's a pretty obvious link. The main way that you would connect the order shipments to the items master is through the item part number itself. And as soon as we identify that common piece of data and establish a link between the two collections, so as soon as we tell our data view, hey, this is what you can marry these two screens together using, we can then have access to all of their collective properties on either screen. Meaning now on my data view, I can pull in any field I like from order shipments, as well as any field I like from items. It doesn't even just have to be product code. I can start pulling in some other things as well. This example is really, really simple, but I wanted to make it clear that this is the main way that data views tie screens together. And I also wanted to make the point that you're not limited to using just two screens or tying together two screens this way. You can theoretically tie together as many screens as you want, and the limit is what links that you can establish, what piece of linking data you can figure out that is common between them and can act as your reference between the two screens.
Hey, Mira, I'm going to hop in real quick and just let everyone know we have a both a chat and a little Q&A function. So if you have any questions or anything, you can shoot them in there, and we'll be looking at that and answering while Amira's going through her thing.
Perfect. Thank you, Tim. Good reminder. So finally, the last thing I want to talk about with regards to data views on these slides is their layouts. So layouts are essentially that data grid that data views output their information to. So they are the main way that a user will actually see and interact with a data view. This slide lists a few of the things that a user can do with their data view layout to make it a little more useful and understandable to themselves. As you can see, a lot of these features are pretty analogous to things that you can do in Microsoft Excel. That similarity is good. It tends to make data view layouts pretty easy for the average user to learn. It's really understandable and palatable to anybody who just uses that Microsoft Office suite regularly. And of all the things you can learn about data views, this is the thing with the easiest learning curve. It's the thing that users tend to get fastest. So users do have the ability to customize and save different layouts. So they can make all of these changes as they like, and if they decide that it's useful enough that they'd like to use it over and over again in the future to continuously complete tasks, they actually have the ability to save it that way and just not waste time having to reinvent the wheel each time. And not only that, but a user-created layout can be set up to, if it's useful enough potentially to other people, it can be set up to be shareable with other people. So if I made one and Tim likes how I set it up and he wants to use it, we can set up layouts to be shared that way. So with all that said, we are going to take a quick break from the slideshow to see a data view layout in action. Just close out here really quickly. And here we are in SyteLine 10. So I want to start off in the Dataview screen because this is the first screen you would go to as just a normal user who is accessing data views. So you're not setting them up from scratch, you have some that exist and you'd like to see them. Dataview screen automatically open with the filter, so let me just take it off and run it wide open. When I take my filter off, all of the data views that I have access to will appear here on this left grid. So as you can see, there are quite a few of them. That's just based on the way that my permissions are set up. In reality, most people will probably only have a limited amount. And actually, just as a quick heads up, the SyteLine comes with a couple hundred preloaded data views. So you can start using this tool without even knowing how to set them up. You can start coming in here and looking what they have to offer. But the example that I want to look at today is a data view that I have built. It's a very simple example. It's the customer order shipments by product code data view. So it's the exact same example we were talking about in our presentation. Now there's not really much else to do on the screen other than select what data view you'd like to run, and the only other thing you can potentially do is look at different layouts and select them. As you can see, I have two here. I'm going to choose this one called LNL, and I am going to launch. The last thing you do on the screen. And what opens here is the Dataview Results screen. this is the screen where you obviously view your Dataview results, but then on top of that, you can edit and save and select different layouts. So if I was interested in, if I opened the wrong layout or I was curious to see how the same information would look in a different layout, I do have the ability to quickly switch over here. But beyond that, the more powerful tools are that I can actually change my layout right from here, just as a user. I just want to walk through a couple of them really quickly with you guys, just to show how easy some of them are. The very first thing I want to show is the filtering functionality. If I want to filter any one of these fields, let's say I'm looking at my order shipments by product code, and I am interested in a specific product code. I can click on this little gear over here, and I can turn on my advanced filters, and I want to say product code contains, and let's say I'm just interested in the product code that's FG-100. So I can apply that filter, and all my results down here are just the ones that meet my criteria. This is what I mentioned earlier as the user-defined filtering. Let me take that filter off. So I can also search comparatively. So let's say I'm only interested in things with just scrolling a little bit to the right here. We've got tons and tons of this old data over here. Maybe I'd only like to see orders that were shipped this year. So I can, again, just go to my advanced filter, and instead of on, I can choose this year. Search. You can see it's only pulling things from 2020. There's quite a bit there, and it's pretty much what you'd expect. There's greater than, less than, equals to, etc. But I just wanted you to get a sense of the different filtering capabilities available. The other thing that you can do from here is sort data. And how you do that is pretty simple. You can just click on these columns to go between ascending and descending order. So if I click it once, you'll notice that all of the lowest values are at the top. If I click it again, all the highest values are at the top. This isn't really a stellar or breakthrough type of feature. It's just, just quality of use. It's just ease of use. So the next thing I would like to go over is moving and hiding columns. So it could be that one of your users comes in and sees this general use data view and says, you know what, there's certain information I really don't care about that much. So let's say I am someone who really isn't all that concerned with the due date. Maybe I'm accounts receivable, and I'm on here to see some of the invoicing information, but it really doesn't matter to me that much when the customer wanted it due. I do have the ability I can either just hide columns on the fly, so I can just click hide and it's gone. I also have an advanced column chooser where I can show and hide things that were as needed. So if I want to hide, let's say the unit price is just not interesting to me, I can hide that. Or if I accidentally hid the due date, but I want to show it again, I can do that as well. As you can see, the due date is here now because I've shown it. Another thing that I can do is I can summarize data based on one particular column. So what I've done here is I've set this up ahead of time just to make sure we're moving along. But the total price, I've decided to display the total sum of whatever records are currently displayed. That's $415,000. And this is dynamically updating based on whatever I have my search results on. So if you think back a couple steps ago, we limited these results to only show the date shipped being 2020, and here's our $415,000. If I take that filter off, let's just close it entirely, and go back to showing all of our data, you'll notice that the sum has jumped up. It changes depending on whatever it is that you're showing on the screen at the time. And not only that, but this comes into play when with grouping data as well. So if I want to group data by, let's say, product code, that's the original intention we had for this data view. I can actually, it's as simple as taking this, clicking and dragging it up here. And now you can see that not only are all of my lines grouped by product code, so product code, whatever this, I think this is just a blank one. Here, the records are down here, the AUFG is down here, etc. Each one of these has its own little sum in addition to the full sum over here. And I can still filter as I need to, even with groupings. I can group by more than one thing as well. So if I want to group by product code and then customer, maybe I have a certain product code that I sell to more than one customer, and I want to get a sense of who's buying it the most. It's just a simple matter of dragging that customer also up there. So this product code right here, this first one, we sell to both customer 1 and customer 6. And you'll notice that it has broken apart that sum of shipments by customer and product code, and then the sum of all of the customers for that product code appear underneath. So it's pretty powerful in that regard. One other thing that we can do is we can set up custom columns. So what I have done on this particular data view, just get rid of these groupings for a second to make life easier for ourselves. I've created 2 custom columns. I've created one that will tell you whether an order was shipped late, and I've created one that will tell you if a quantity is left, what quantity of units are left to invoice. As you can see, I can have different outputs. For the quantity left to invoice, I chose an output of just a number, and for the late, I've chosen just a checkbox. The late is essentially comparing the date shipped against the due date, and if the due date is before the date shipped, it will enable. So in this case, our due date was on December 7th, but we didn't ship until December 8th. So therefore, it came back with a true result. The quantity left to invoice is simply just a number. What it's doing is it's taking the quantity shipped minus the quantity invoice and telling you how much left you should expect to invoice. And again, this is just to demonstrate what it is able to do. In this case, it looks like we've invoiced all of the orders that meet our current filter criteria. And this was an instance where we invoiced over what we shipped. And so that's why we see that -25 here. Again, just to see some of these features in action. Now, let's say I change some things around about this layout, and I just really like how it is. It's very useful to me as a user. Maybe I'd put the grouping up here. I have the ability to save this layout for future use. So if I always want to see it come up like this every single time, I would simply click this little gear on any one of these columns. I would choose Manage Layout, and I would just save it as my own layout. So this is my Amira user layout. Just hit OK. Save was successful. And it should immediately appear on the Select Layout screen. So as you can see, it now appears along with the other 2 that were there originally. The beauty of Dataview Results and Dataviews in general is there's a lot of functionality that I don't have to decide immediately on setting it up. There's a lot of things I can just leave to the user to do themselves based on what's useful to them. And so it makes these tools really versatile and universal as well. Just moving along really quickly, making sure we're doing good on the time.
Hey, one quick thing, Amira. Someone brought up, in terms of data, the data expression elements, column expressions. In 10, they're using that. In 9 and 8, they actually, you would go in and choose custom columns. And it's actually, truth be told, we kind of preferred that. It's a lot more like just kind of an Excel interface of, drag this equals this, and add your kind of qualifiers. So that's, in prior to 10, it's custom columns, and in 10, it's using the data expression or column expressions.
Yep, that's a good point. That is a major difference between how the data views run between 9 and 10. And just to show you kind of what it looks like, here are the 2 expressions that I set up for this late column and this quantity left to invoice column. I believe we can provide a link in the chat to the Infor help article hub, And if you do searches for the expression columns, you'll find a couple of helpful articles to get you started. But if you do have additional questions, we have a lot of people with good experience on that subject, and we're happy to set up just training or to talk through it or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's Michael asked how we created the custom fields, and I'm going to post that in the chat, the link to the documentation on that as well. Question from Scott: can you group multiple items, for example, by customer and then by name? Yeah, you can have I don't say infinite, but as many hierarchical levels of group by that you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could technically come in here and go really crazy with the group bys. I could do customer and due date and quantity shipped, and I mean now I'm starting to not make sense here, but just illustrating, I can theoretically pull as many of these up here as I want.
Any UETs that you add to an IDO automatically get pushed out to the data views as well. So yeah, anything that you do. I would say one thing though, if anyone gets into the form design and they take advantage of, like in every collection, there's a bunch of these UDF character or decimal or long integer, short integer type things. If you use those, they actually don't show up in data views, but the UETs do. I'm done.
Okay, sure thing. No, thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. You do, by the way, have the ability to export these data views in an Excel format or a PDF format. That's as simple as going to this send to and choosing which format you'd like. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through it, but I will tell you that when you're exporting to Excel, the neat feature is if you have these groupings, which again, you can kind of expand and contract them, that will be output into Excel as a data grouping that you can also expand and contract. So it's pretty neat. It'll just mimic exactly the format you see here, if for whatever reason you need to bring this stuff out to Excel. So, going really quickly to Dataview Setup, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time here because again, we're keeping it really high level. We don't want to get too into the weeds. I just want to show you just generally what the IDOs and the properties look like, and just get a general exposure to how it is that you tie them together. This Dataview Setup screen is what you use to first determine what your IDOs are, and also determine which one is your parent and your child IDO. Your parent IDO is the one that the other data will stem off of, is the easiest way to think about it. And in this case, we have chosen that SLCO ships the order shipment screen to be that parent. What we do with properties is quite easy. We just go in and yes, I want this. No, I don't want this. Yes, I want this. So pretty simple stuff there. The filter is basically just a way to build these expressions to say, I want to see these results come up on the data view and not these other results. So unlike the filtering we saw on the Dataviews Results screen, this one will affect what gets pulled in to begin with. The user cannot turn this off. So this is a good way to keep them focused on, if you need to keep them focused on certain records, you can do it at this level. And in this case, for my data view, I've chosen to only pull in order shipments where the customer number is not null. So it was not blank, is how we say that in English. And the items is built the same way. And really the main difference I just want to point out is the linkage. Because this is not a parent IDO, it's a child, I needed to find a way to link it back to the original collection that we started with. And so the property that's known as COI item on order shipments, the parent property, is what's known as item on the child property, which is the items master. And that's it. That's literally how I tell the system that I need this is equal to this. So really nothing too tough at all. The input parameters, which I promised we would go over, is pretty cool. Like I said, it's a hybrid of the different filtering techniques. I just want to show you what happens if I set one up. Let's say that I want to put an input parameter of ship date. And I want to use my operator as greater than. What this is going to tell the system is when you launch this data view, ask the user for what ship date they want to be greater than for all of their results, and then only launch with that filter ahead of time. So let me save this right here, and I'm going to do something called unloading all global form objects. This is just a neat tool you can use to kind of clear the system's memory, especially if it's not refreshing. Data views usually require that any updates will need that unload. And then I'm going to launch. And just watch how it's a little bit different than the first time we did it. Rather than open up Dataview Results immediately, I'm presented with this date shipped screen. It wants me to choose a date shipped after which it will present all of the results. So if I put in 12/31, sorry, that didn't even happen yet, 2019, and hit finish, you will notice that my Dataview results are now all in 2020. This is just, it's the way that you want your users to have to deal with the data view. The rest of Dataview setups is pretty simple. There's user permissions to set up which people or which groups you would like to have access. This is where you kind of view the layouts and can copy them and make new ones and share them with other people. And the report options really mainly has to do with that export to PDF we mentioned earlier. These are just a few parameters related to that. So, but we've covered most of the basics. And so with that, I would like to move back to our presentation and talk a little bit about critical numbers. So, we mentioned earlier that critical numbers are unique from data views in the sense that they're able to take a bunch of records from a query and then convert it into this singular, summarized, high-level value. At their heart, how you can tell a critical number, what screens and fields to look at, is exactly the same way you tell a data view that information. You use IDO collections and properties, just as we saw like a couple seconds ago. And just like a data view, you do have the ability to preset filters ahead of time. Make sure you're grabbing exactly what records and data you need and nothing more and nothing less. Just again, canceling out that noise that would distract you from the task at hand. And unlike data views though, you have a couple of features available to you that allow you to define how you want to consolidate the data or consolidate your output and also define your output. So you can choose the way the consolidation works is that you can choose a specific property and apply a mathematical operation to it. So I want to see the total cost on something. I can put it as a sum. I want to see a count on something. I want to see an average on something. I want to see the min or the max value on something. These are how you consolidate a ton of records down to one KPI number. You can also take it a step further, as we mentioned before, and we can actually apply definitions, so alerts and goals. But actually backing up 2 steps, just 1 second, we can hone in as well with the filters on a certain date range. So with critical numbers, we have the ability to take these snapshot values based on more than one date range. We can say, I want to see what my year-to-date value of this is, or what my period-to-date value is, or what's my value this week on something, which that basically allows you to take a look at a critical number and not have its results muddied up by something that happened in the past. So if I want to look at this year's sales margins, I may not necessarily want last year's sales margins to get in and kind of pollute that. I just want to see truly what is happening this year. I don't want to see what happened 5 years ago. But going back to the alerts and the goals, your alert, just to get familiar with the terminology, your alert is what's defining the bad range, and your goal is what's defining the good range. That's where or your intended range. In some cases, your goals and alerts don't necessarily run up against each other. Their limits are, 2 different numbers. In this example here, our alert ends at 50% and our goal starts at 75%. If there's a buffer, that buffer of numbers that aren't quite the target, but also aren't quite in the red, are what's known as a warning zone. They're not specifically defined like alerts and goals are. With alerts and goals, you say what you want your set points to be. Your warnings are just kind of intrinsically created as if there is a gap between those 2 set points. And the last 2 points I have here on my slide, drill downs and snapshots, they actually get their own slides. So let's just move on to those really quickly. So starting with the drill downs. This is the way that we take a critical number and expand it out into more detailed records, which sounds super weird on the surface because we just got done talking about how the main advantage to critical numbers is you can take a bunch of detailed data and sort of boil it down to one number. So why on earth would we take this high-level tool and want more detail out of it? The fact is that as nice as it is to just kind of operate at a high level all the time, it is important to realize that we can't always, especially when there's a problem. So if a KPI is falling into a warning or an alert range, or maybe it's just not quite as stellar as we'd hoped and expected it to be, it's really helpful to be able to dive into exactly what's driving a critical number value and diagnose where it is that our attention needs to go. The best way to think about a drill down is it's the data view that sits in the background of a critical number and contains all of its supporting records that that critical number is ultimately based off of. So in our example below, the critical number is, we're kind of going back to that inventory value that we mentioned. Let's say our inventory value in total is $2.5 million. And maybe we want a more detailed breakdown of why it's $2.5 million. We can open what's known as a drill down. This drill down is, it's breaking apart that $2.5 million inventory value into values by specific warehouse, California, Oregon, and Washington. And we can kind of get a sense of how each one of these is contributing to that total end number. And a really cool feature about drill downs is you can set them up to be layered. So you can apply a sub drill down to a drill down. So for example, if we're looking at that maybe $1 million in the California warehouse inventory value, and we want to get a better sense of like, why is it that high? Why did it reach that number? We have the ability to, drill down further into that and get to this really, really detailed level if we want to set it up to go down to that level. And we can figure out immediately if we have any obvious offenders. So in this case, let's say if we're a more made to order, we try to keep our inventory low type of company, we might look at some of these higher value items and try to figure out, okay, why are we accumulating so much on them? And that can drive us to make executive decisions. So we might decide to start evaluating the cost at which we make some of these higher ticket items, or we may decide to scale back production entirely on them. So that's just a very, very simple example to show by drilling down into a critical number, you have the ability to give yourself the tools to make these really important executive level decisions. And I just want to move on to our last point though, which is snapshots. A critical number snapshot is a critical number that essentially existed at one point in time, and we saved it to be viewable in the future. So you can take snapshots on the fly, or you can set them to run in a background queue. So, you can set them to run automatically every month or every week or every day, whatever happens to be appropriate for the critical number that you're dealing with. And while there is a benefit to being able to take those snapshots on the fly, it really is the background queue ones or the ones that get taken over a long period of time that makes them the most useful. Because those are the ones where you can start to answer questions like, are we seeing our KPIs hold stable over time? Are they getting better? Are they getting worse? And you can use that history to start to redefine what your business considers to be on target or normal. So an ideal example would be your business starts to outgrow its old metrics or its old goals. You might need to start hitting some more ambitious sales targets, for instance. And critical numbers can alert you to that you need to start looking at expanding and just being more rigorous. Or it can work in the opposite direction. So 2020 is a perfect example. You can have just this global level event that makes it so you need to scale back your expectations. You need to be a little bit more realistic. What you accomplished last year is not necessarily what you can accomplish this year. That's what critical numbers can give you insight into. The snapshots are a valuable tool for this high-level trending that you can then use to drive business decisions. And all that trend data is stored right in SyteLine to be pulled up and analyzed anytime you need it. It's sort of in this graph format, which is convenient. But if not, you also have the ability to, if you want, export it to Excel and deal with it that way. It depends on the preference. So with all that said, let's take a quick look at critical numbers in action as our final example. So we're going to start, as we did last time, on the screen that most users will be using to search for their critical number. The critical numbers screen is set up a little bit differently from the Dataview screen in that it's not just a big mass of every single one you have access to. It's actually organized into categories, and you have the ability to add more categories as needed. These are just the ones that come stock with SyteLine based on the functional areas that might exist in a typical business. And we're going to look into the purchasing one today. So when I click the purchasing critical number, the first thing that comes up is these are actually all of these critical numbers that fall under this category are all appearing down here. And you'll notice that some of them are the same as each other, and the only thing that differs is the range. So this is our PO receipts for the year, for the quarter, for the month, for the week. And you'll notice that the number is actually different on each one. We didn't have any PO receipts this month or week, but we did have a small amount this quarter and a larger amount this year. And these are all color-coded according to whether they fell into the good range or the goal range, I should say, the warning range, or the alert range. And you see some that are gray too. These are ones where there was no goal or alert defined, and it's just information only. By the way, you do have the ability to customize these colors if you want to. If you don't like green, yellow, and red, you can use whatever makes the most sense. I want to drill down, I want to choose specifically this critical number called outstanding receipts. And I just want to show you that on the screen, you can get a quick view of what it is right now, basically. And the only other thing you can do on the screen at this point is take a snapshot or generate one. So it's going to take a snapshot as of today and process. And refresh really quickly. And there you go. This is the snapshot that we took. And our period to date and our today is $0, but our year to date does have a value. So that's pretty much it for this critical number screen. There's not a whole lot else you can do here. If you want to get a sense of all of the critical number snapshots you've taken in history, you can go to the screen called Critical Number Snapshots. And what it will show you actually is every single critical number from every single category. It's a way to quickly navigate to them. And I mentioned earlier that trending data will appear as a graph. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but it's actually taking these metrics as time goes along. You know, these spikes and these dips are different critical numbers that were taken along the way, the snapshots.
In a mirror, because that's just a Mongoose form, you could actually click the to Excel there and take the actual snapshot history and repurpose it for something else, right?
Exactly. All of this column data is easy enough to get into Excel and process any way you like.
Or since that's actually an IDO, you could create a data view from that.
That's true. You can indeed layer them that way. But yeah, this snapshot again doesn't have it's basically for reviewing the snapshots, and it's a one-purpose type of screen. Just to very, very briefly go into the critical number setup, we're going to go to the one that we are looking at, the outstanding PO receipts, which I just happen to know is number 67. And The setup, you might notice, is it has some similar terminology to the data views. We do have the ability to set up users and groups. We do have ability to set up parameters, which will help us with our search. We do have the ability to look at what categories any given critical number is part of and add more if we would like to. The source is set up very similarly. You can choose your IDO collection as your source of data. And the main place where it differs from data views is you're choosing a specific function and a specific property as what you want your final output of a critical number to be. You have the ability to set some filters ahead of time. This was the filter that this critical number came preloaded with. It has some filters related to the warehouse. And here I've selected these three as my date ranges of interest. And I can turn them off and turn them on as needed if I don't care about period to date and instead I want week to date. I don't want today, but instead I want last year to date for comparison purposes. It's easy enough to turn that on and off and just hit OK and save. This is the screen where I would also set up what my alerts and goals are. So again, what's in the red, what's in the green. Just as a reminder, the alert is defining what's in the bad range. So right now we have it set up so anything above $25 million is considered bad, but anything below $21 million is considered our target. We have the ability here to select which drill down will appear when we click on that critical number and try to get more information. And we have the ability to look at every single snapshot we've ever taken on this critical number, which they're all in the green right now. Just wanted to, and the drill down setup, not going to get too far into that, but just to really quickly show you, the setup resembles critical numbers. You've got, you define your source, you have the ability to define these even more specific alerts and goals, output columns, categories. The main thing that is different is you have the ability to set up sub drill downs here. So let's say on this outstanding receipts drill down, I want to be able to take any record on it and see all of my POs PO lines which are open. If I set up a separate drill down, I can kind of define it as a sub drill down and just select it here. So it can get quite detailed depending on how deep you want to go into it. Just want to very briefly show you a critical number in action. Here we go. Here's our outstanding receipts. And as you can see, our actual value is a little under $21 million, which is still in our goal. And if I wanted to, just to show you what it looks like if we are not meeting our goal, let's say our goal was less than $20 million. I can refresh, and as you can see, we're now in the yellow. Or let's say that our alert was anything that is greater than our goal is less than 15 million and our alert is anything greater than 20 million, we'll expect that this should be in the red now. Let's give it a second to refresh. There we go. So now it's in the red. The actual value has not changed all this time, just the goal and the alert. We're providing a different definition. And if we click on it, we get our drill down, which resembles and behaves exactly like a data view. It has all of the same functionality. And if I had a sub drill down setup, I could do it here.
One thing about just the alerts and the snapshot combination, because you'd be taking a snapshot, creating a record, you could actually use the application event system there to send workflows if you wanted based on your snapshot if it was out of range. So you could do even more with that.
Good point. Yep, you can set it up on the background queue to be taken automatically so we don't have to do that as manual work and remember that each time. So that is pretty much what we wanted to cover today. This covered all of the main topics and the main concepts of data views and critical numbers. And if I go back to my slides really quick, just a quick recap. So what we covered was these two tools, data views and critical numbers. We talked about what they are and why you'd use them. We talked about, where it is that they're similar and where it is that they're different, and the different situations in which you'd want to use each one. Really, it all boils down to what kind of output you'd like to see. We talked about the building blocks used to put them together. We went into a little bit more detail about data view layouts, which are the main way that users consume the data view tool. And we talked about critical number drill downs, which is sort of like a diagnostic tool for critical numbers that don't quite appear in the place that you want them to be. And we went over a few real world examples of actual things that you could use these data views and critical numbers to solve as problems. And with that, Tim, did we have any other questions that we needed to answer at this point?
Thanks. Yeah. So, Michael asked earlier, can you filter the stuff based on a comparison to other properties? Like, I want to see everything where the quantity shipped is less than the quantity invoiced. So, couple things about that. What Amir showed you was the version 10 multi-tenant SaaS layout. You also, like I mentioned in version 9, you've got a different UI there to do custom columns as well versus data expressions. You actually, even in version 10, if you're using the click once, you can, you have those custom columns without the data expressions that you can use. And if you do it that way and you are in the click once, you can filter on custom columns. So what you would do in that particular case is you would create a custom number or custom column that's a decimal type, and you would, basically say it equals quantity shipped minus quantity invoiced, and based on that number, then you could filter on that. So you could still use all that stuff even in 10, but it's just in the web UI where the data expression columns are, and that does not work as well. In fact, if you create a custom column in the click once UI and then go to render it in the web, it doesn't look like what you'd think it would. Doesn't work out so well. But yeah, in short, you can do that with the either the click once in 10 or all the versions prior to that.
In the prior versions to 10, you would do that right on the Dataview Setup screen, or that audio setup.
The layout, actually. You do it on the layout.
Okay.
But that was it. That was it for the questions. And we're
okay.
4 minutes in. Thank you, everyone. If you have any other questions or anything, you can kind of shoot an email back from where the invite came. Or I think actually right there, info. And happy to help. If you guys have some things you want to do with this and you're working with one of the other channel partners, we're a big family, let us know. We'll kind of get you hooked up with your appropriate partner as well. But thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Mm-hmm.